Hi guys, how are you? Okay, so I always find it interesting to learn about different artists. And one of the favorite things that I really love to do, and I actually super miss about living in New York City, is all the wonderful museums. You go to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and you're fascinated by ancient art as well as probably some modern pieces, but mostly a little bit different artists from different parts of the world. You go to the Museum of Natural History and you can see fossils, because even though fossils are, you might not think of it as a work of art, but the way it's kind of like set up, it can also look like a work of art. And seeing also like the Islamic section, the way people from the indigenous community, and these are all ways of art expressing yourself. Obviously, I really love the Museum of Modern Art, and that's like one of my favorite museums, which has contemporary art. And then going and traveling all around the world to different museums, looking at Gaudi's work in Barcelona, watching different artists, and even street art is like super fascinating. So it's always wonderful to learn, how did this person come about and just kind of get inspired and become this fantastic artist who just produces all this amazing work. So you may think that certain things are mundane, and by that I mean like everyday items, but we have an artist by the name of Andy Warhol, and he was super important in the pop art scene. And what he did is, one of his famous pieces of work is something just like a replication of Campbell's soup cans. That's like one of his most famous pieces. And you'd be like, how is Campbell's soup so extraordinary? What is so interesting about Campbell's soup? I eat it in the afternoon, or maybe I don't even eat it and I just see it when I'm going through the supermarket. But just realizing that everyday things can easily look like forms and sources of inspiration, and can actually, depending on the person who's viewing it, can see it, hey, that is a work of art. Somebody thought about how I'm going to set that up. So he also did something. There's a famous artist who was very popular in the 50s and 60s and was considered one of the most beautiful women. I do think she was definitely pretty, but her name is Marilyn Monroe. And he did something also repeating and just kind of having her face in different colors. So you guys might have seen work that might not necessarily be Marilyn Monroe, but you say, hey, I've seen that idea. I've seen kind of the idea of having a photograph and kind of repeating it with slight different colors. And if you look at modern filters that we have on social media, such as Snapchat, which I don't use, Instagram, or everything, we have all these filters that can kind of create, if I want to appear like I'm blue, I'm sure there's a filter out there that can create me and make me look blue. So I thought it would be neat for us to read about our friend Andy Warhol. And this is a great book. It's called Kid Artists, True Tales of Childhood from Creative Legends. So we all know that these artists, they were children just like you at one point. So we're just gonna go ahead and read about Andy Warhol, and I hope we will both find some interesting things. So it starts off by saying Andy Warhol, mother knows best. And then we see Andy over here with a Dracula. So let's just see what that's all about. I'm curious. Okay, so Andy Warhol's colorful portraits of famous people helped him become one of the most celebrated pop artists of the 1960s. But he might never have made it out of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is in Pennsylvania. If not for the love and support of the biggest superstar of them of all, his mother, Julia. How many of us have moms who are always telling us awesome work? You know, moms really make a major difference. Praised for his colorful portraits of cultural icons, Andy Warhol was known as the Prince of Pop. That is, pop art, a style of painting that he helped pioneer. However, the world he grew up in was anything but princely. In fact, Andy's parents often struggled to put food on the table for him and his two older brothers. Andre and Julia Warhola were immigrants who had moved to America from a small mountain village in the Carpathian Mountains of Eastern Europe, a region made famous by the author Bram Stoker in his horror novel Dracula. As an adult, Andy would be known to his friends as Drella, a combination of Dracula and Cinderella, two of his favorite fictional characters. The Warhols settled in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a city with a large immigrant family. Okay, so over there we see, now we understand why it is that he has that Dracula right next to him. And if we read the caption, it says, I am from the Carpathian Mountains. Me too. Okay, let's continue. Andy's father worked in a construction company and was away from home a lot, seeking out odd jobs to make a living. Julia, Andy's mother, was the artist in the family. She was a whiz at crochet, loved to draw angels and cats, and carve flower sculptures out of old soup cans. Remember, we were talking about the soup cans. Now we know why he sees it as an art form, which she sold to earn extra money for the household. Let's go take a look. So she used those cans to make flowers. Isn't that pretty cool? And she could also use it like a vase, which she did. All right. When Andy was born, his family lived in a cramped two-room apartment overlooking the Ohio River. The bathtub was in the middle of the kitchen. For a bathroom, they used an outhouse in an alley behind the building. At home, the Warhols spoke little English, communicating instead in a mixture of Ukrainian and Hungarian known as Po Nasimu. Hope I'm pronouncing it right. The language barrier made it hard for Andy to talk to other kids in his neighborhood. As a result, he became shy and had only a few close friends. Andy had a few luxuries when he was growing up, but he tried to make the best of what he had. His parents couldn't afford to buy him a bicycle, so he rode on the handlebars of his friend's bike. So he's riding on the top. So that's pretty good. A dog was too expensive, so Andy kept a pet chicken until one day his mother turned it into chicken soup. That was a feast compared to the usual dinner time fare in the frugal Warhol home, a bland tomato soup made from ketchup mixed with water, salt, and pepper. When Andy was 4 years old, his brother Paul enrolled him in the first grade at the local school. Andy was 2 years younger than most of his classmates, but Paul thought being around other kids would cure him of his shyness. He was wrong. On the first day of school, a girl slapped Andy in the face. Andy was so upset that he cried all the way home and refused to go back the next day. So we see our little friend Andy, who is walking around with a chicken as a pet. Now, there's a place in California, I believe it's in California, well, all these like rich people who work in the tech business, and they actually think having chickens as pets is pretty cool. I know that in my neighborhood, there was a little girl who had chicken as a pet. So you don't necessarily have to be poor, you just gotta like chickens. But Andy the pet was no longer alive. He made it into soup, but still. Let's continue. Paul thought Andy should return to class, but Andy's mother decided to let her son stay home until he was old enough to deal with strangers. For the next few years, while his brothers headed off to school, Andy remained behind with his mother. It turned out to be one of the happiest times of his life. Andy's mother used their time together to teach her son about creating art. She shared her tin can sculptures with him, and they took turns drawing pictures of the family cat. When the weather was nice, she and Andy would go shopping downtown. One time, Andy's mother bought herself a black felt hat. Andy decorated it with gold paint around the edges. It was one of his first solo artistic creations. Let's go take a look at a picture of what Andy is. He's drawing a portrait of his cat. Okay, let's continue. Andy quickly developed a reputation as the local neighborhood artist. When kids would play baseball in the street near his home, Andy positioned himself deep in the outfield, making it easy for him to scamper away when no one was looking. If the ball was hit in his direction, the other kids would discover that Andy was no longer there. He had run home to work on his illustrations. They found him sitting with his sketchpad drawing flowers. Andy's other interests were movies, and his hobby was to spend every Saturday morning at the neighborhood theater. His favorite film was Alice in Wonderland, and his favorite actress was Shirley Temple. While his brothers toiled on their schoolwork, Andy read movie magazines and kept a scrapbook of photographs of Hollywood stars. Eventually, he begged his mother to buy him a projector so he could watch movies at home. So there's Andy. Instead of playing baseball, he is drawing, and he loves movies. I love movies. I'm not so sure if I love them as much as him though. Julia took a job doing housework until she saved up enough money to buy the projector. She had no money left over for the screen, but Andy found a solution. He projected the cartoons onto the wall of his room. Then he drew copies of the characters in his sketchbooks. On Sundays, Andy and his mom attended religious services at the local Byzantine Catholic Church. Within this quiet space, he became mesmerized by the rows of holy icons, paintings of saints that hung over the altar. Later, when Andy became an artist, he models some of his portraits after these sacred images. When Andy was 6 years old, it was decided he would go back to school. He was still shy, but he was learning to get along with strangers. His favorite part of the school day was lunch, when he could go home and slurp down a bowl of Campbell's soup prepared by his mother. Andy found that his drawing skills helped him impress the other kids. He drew portraits of his classmates, decorated the black room with a special border according to the season, and created pictures for the classroom calendar. The teachers began to take notice of his artistic activities. Okay, so that's it for today. We will continue. There's Andy over there staring at the screen that he used the wall to do. And again, his favorite soup turned out to be Campbell's soup. So that kind of gives you an idea of how and why he's interested in kind of replicating the Campbell soup. We'll learn more about our friend Andy Warhol. I hope you enjoyed this. Have an awesome day. Bye.